I'm going to be talking to you about Winston Churchill and his speech, "We Shall Fight on the Beaches." To get in the mindset of his speech, we have to go back to June of 1940. This speech was given about a week and a half to 2 weeks after the events that happened at Dunkirk, if you've seen that movie. Um, Basically, the British and French forces got forced back to the English Channel and were able to barely escape being completely defeated by Nazi Germany. And following this event, Winston Churchill comes before the House of Commons to deliver a speech. And his goal of the speech is to motivate the nation to keep fighting, even though they'd already seen a lot of countries in Europe fall. Before we get too deep into the speech, I want to start by taking a second just to define persuasion. Um, we can remember that persuasion is a symbolic process in which a communicator attempts to influence others, changing their attitudes, beliefs, or actions through the transmission of a message, all under conditions that allow free choice. Churchill doesn't coerce his audience by pleading with them to do something. Rather, he inspires them and he shapes how they feel about their circumstances and encourages them to take action and keep fighting. To start with ethos, um, this is really tied to Churchill's credibility. He himself was an important part of the message. His entire persona was crucial to the speech's persuasiveness. Churchill's reputation was to be a steadfast leader and a seasoned statesman, and he was someone who long warned of the Nazi threat to England and to Europe. And by the time he delivered his speech, he had already been proven right about Germany's aggression. The previous Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, had tried to appease Germany, but it didn't work. And Winston Churchill was one of the biggest critics of Chamberlain. And so, with this in mind, the British people knew that they could already trust him in his judgment when he came on to deliver this speech. The logos is the next area of his argument that we'll need to address. Um, he starts by acknowledging the grave danger Britain faces. Basically, the British and the French had just been defeated um, by Germany in their defense of Poland. And he talks about Dunkirk, which was a major event and really a shocking event for the people of these countries. Just 20 years before in World War One, the French army had been revered as one of the strongest armies in all of Europe, and now the German army had pushed them back in just a few days all the way to the English Channel. So he acknowledges this, but he also talks about a logical framework that Britain can't surrender or negotiate um, because of the alternative would mean subjugation and the end of freedom in Europe. And this stance underpins his persuasive appeal. He doesn't simply say we must fight as a baseless rallying cry. He shows why fighting is the only viable path. We know that logic alone isn't enough. Um, Without the emotional appeal, it's hard to be persuasive. And his speech is really laden with emotion. Um, It evokes shared values like national pride, honor, resilience, and the love of freedom. He uses vivid imagery and repetition. He says, "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets." And this really forges a collective bond with the people of the nation because it references where any one of them could be at any time and how deep of a commitment that Britain needs to have to defeating Germany. Um, and by repeating "we shall fight," he reassures his audience that they're not alone. It's the nation united, standing shoulder to shoulder, and this emotional resonance not only motivates but also comforts at a time of profound uncertainty. And I also want to talk about how Churchill's speech uses many of the persuasive techniques from the Weapons of Influence chapter we read by Robert Cialdini. First, he uses a fixed action pattern. He repeats, "We shall fight" over and over again. And this compels listeners to rally behind the cause because it elicits an automatic emotional response. They know what's coming and they can predict what's coming next. He also leverages the scarcity principle by framing Britain as the last line of defense against Nazi Germany. He emphasizes the irreplaceable role of Britain in preserving freedom, and he makes the stakes feel both urgent and invaluable. And this scarcity increases perceived value and motivates action, which Churchill is able to achieve through his speech. He also taps into social proof and authority by referencing the nation's history of resilience and framing the fight as a continuation of Britain's legacy. Social proof assures people that they are not alone in their resolve, and Churchill's own authority as Prime Minister solidifies his message's credibility. And lastly, he uses the contrast principle, which heightens the stakes by juxtaposition between Nazi Germany occupying Britain and the nobility of their cause and resistance. The principle shows the stark contrasts make the preferred option seem even more essential and worth fighting for. So, just to review, Churchill uses his credibility as a leader to establish ethos. He makes a logical case for resistance. He uses emotional connection through shared values. And he uses fixed action patterns, repetition for unity. He lays out the critical role of Britain to highlight the scarcity principle. He illustrates historical resilience of the British people as social proof, and he uses the high stakes of the conflict to emphasize the contrast principle. So thanks for watching.